Hello, my name is Eric Simpson, the lead solventless consultant for PureCannalabs, and today we're going to be going over some tips and tricks to prevent bag slippage or hydroplaning. So we're going to go ahead and get right into it. So to start with, we're going to be showing you how to pack some rosin bags. These are the 2.5 by 4.5 mesh rosin bags, nylon from PurePressure. Now, these are really my go-to when I'm pressing. So first we're going to flip these inside out with a quick flip tool provided. So with these 2.5 by 4.5, our ideal weight in there is going to be between 20 and 25 grams. That way we are not overpacking them at that point. So once we got our 20 to 25 grams in these, and this, like I said, this is the 2.5 by 4.5, we're going to go ahead and just give it some hand pressure just so the hash kind of sticks together in there. And we're going to fold that flap over, 1/2 inch to 1/4 inch is what we're looking for. And then we're going to double bag this, and when we double bag this, we're going to put the flap facing down in the second bag, and we're going to line the seams up on the opposite side. So we're going to do seams opposite side, flap face down, and we're going to slide it in there nice and clean. Now that is ready for the pre-press at this point. Now the reason we use the pre-press is just to really flatten everything down. And if you keep everything nice and even, then it won't slide out on the plates. So this is a good technique just for helping with that slippage, to prevent that. We really just want to get that hash patty as even as possible. Nice even patty, and that is ready to press. So these are the 2.5 by 9 bags from PurePressure, and these I like to load between 40 and 50 grams at a time. Now when you're loading these bags, it's really important to flatten it out as much as you can and utilize that pre-press so you get that nice flat bag going. So these are the more likely bags, in my opinion, to slip on the press. Because the hash can liquefy and kind of get melty and move all the way from one side of the bag to the other. So we're going for 40-50 grams in here. So once we get our hash in there, we really want to start at the back end and just kind of form it with your hand, and you get a good idea of how much room that's going to take up in the bag. We want to flatten it out nice and evenly. And we're going to fold over our flap there and our edge, give it a nice little hand press to keep all that hash together. It helps as we're putting it in that second bag if it's all kind of a little pre-formed there. Now that we kind of have it pre-formed, we're going to go ahead and slide it in our other bag. And the same thing, we're going to do the flap down and the seams on the opposite side. So seams opposite, flap facing down. I'm going to slide it right in there. We want a nice clean fold on the inside there, no wrinkles or anything, and nice and flattened puck. So now we could go ahead and put this in the pre-press. We want to get it as flat as possible. So really utilize your pre-press, especially on these bigger bags. It's really important. Right, so we got a nice flat bag and that thing is ready to press. Alright, so we're going to start with just folding our parchment directly in half. Nice clean fold. We're going to take our folded side and slip it through the plates and put it in that clip nice and secure all the way down. Now just putting your paper properly in there is going to help with everything, you know. You're going to have less trouble with anything if your paper is nice and secure to start with before you even load your bags. We're going to take that bottom piece of paper, we're going to stick it down in that clip. Should have a little wrinkle if it's done right. Put our top paper up and now we're ready to go ahead and load our bags. Now we're going to be pressing 2.5 by 4.5, between 20 and 25 grams each in these. And we're going to be pressing 2 at a time, side by side on the press. This is my preferred method for not having any slippage problems on the press. It's just, you go through a lot of hash this way with no problems. Whereas if you have one big bag, the hash can get warm and move all the way from side to side. With these smaller bags, the hash doesn't have that ability to move all the way to one side of the plate. So it essentially locks it in and it's bulletproof. So this is my recommendation. You know, through pre-pressing, through the preheat mode, and through other methods, you could have solid presses. But with the 2 bags, you're just going to have less problems. So now that we like where those are at, we want them centered left and right on the plate and back and forth. So 2.5 inch bag, we should have in a 3 inch plate, we should have a 1/4 inch on each side of that. So we like where it's at, we're going to go ahead and put our top paper down. Feel that we are nice and centered on the plate there. Now that we like where it's at, we're going to go ahead and hit our preheat button. And we're going to hold down our actuator buttons and bring it right down and kiss the bag.
Notice that angle on the heat plates? Hey guys, it's Eric with PurePressure. Let's talk about the way the Long's Peak and Pike's Peak apply force. The pivoting actuating truss ensures full contact with the rosin bag. An even distribution of pressure and temperature throughout the material and across the surface of the bag will yield more consistent and repeatable results. Now, back to the video.
So once we're on top of the bag and we're actually, with the preheat mode, when we stop that plate, we're at 0 psi. So we have no pressure on there, we're essentially just warming that bag up. Now we're going to give it a couple little tamps, just to make sure it's nice and secure and that paper's tight. And at this point we go ahead and put our paper up. Fold our bottom piece to this machine line there so it's nice and clean. And then we're going to undo that clip in the back just so we have better flow back there. So at this point, we are watching our bags. They're starting to get nice and wet from the preheat. And we're going to hit our actuator buttons and we're going to watch the bags and make sure we're not having any slippage. So this would be the point where if you are slipping or anything, you lay off the pressure, give it a little longer preheat, tamp it until it's ready to go. But we're already solid, so we're going to go ahead and hold these actuator buttons down, and at the same time we're going to reach up and hit that preheat. And we have to hold those down for 5 seconds, just like we're going into a press. So now we're into our press, we're at 5 psi, no slippage, no movement, we're good to go. And we're going to slowly just start ramping this up. I start with 2 psi. Give it a second to get a little more flow and react to that pressure. 2 more. And we just want to slowly ramp that up. We're just going to feather it up. We're not in a hurry to try to get all that rosin on the parchment. We're going to go up by 3 now. We're reacting essentially to how much rosin is coming out of it. So we have enough on our parchment, we could start going up by 5. And let it react, let it flow a little, and we go up by 5 again. We'll go up 5 one more time. So at this point, now that we have enough flow onto the parchment, and a lot of that hash has escaped the bag. We could start going up by 10 psi. And we're going to hit 10 psi, watch, make sure there's no ill reaction, and then we're going to go ahead and go up 10 again. And we're going to cruise that 10 psi up all the way to max pressure, which is between 120 and 140 psi. Now my average press time when I'm pressing between 40 and 50 grams like we are here is about 3.5 minutes with a 45-second warm-up. So we're not in a hurry. I'd rather you take your whole time getting up to pressure than to be blowing bags and slipping them out. So. You can start ramping up your pressure quicker in the second half of the press than the first half. So we're 2.5 minutes in and we're at max pressure. So for the next minute, essentially, we're just going to let the rest of that flow come off, that full pressure. Now we would get our maximum yield. And pressing this style with a 2 bag side by side is just very efficient. You could flow through it. The less problems you have on the press and the quicker you're able to press your hash, the better and more efficient it's going to be. I average about a pound an hour with this process, with this style of pressing. So you talk about 8 pounds in an 8-hour day, and that's efficiency. So we're creeping up to our 3.5 minutes. We're going to go ahead and hit stop press. And we don't want these papers to touch right now because we don't want rosin everywhere. So we're going to hold that with one hand, support the parchment with the other. Either have tweezers or grab it with your fingers, just the corner of the bags, and pull them out while the press is still hot, and that way you're not going to get rosin stuck all over to your bags. You set these aside for a second press later down the line. Nice and efficient. We used the whole parchment at that point, so 50 grams at a time, 40-50 grams, it's a very efficient way to go. No problems as far as slippage with a 2 bag method. That's my definite recommendation as far as, there's other ways between the pre-press and the preheat and just getting your paper secured in there. But that being said, that 2 bag method is just bulletproof. So that's my recommendation. If you are using the bigger bags, just make sure to take your time and pre-press those as tight as possible and evenly as possible. we're starting to see a little slippage on this because it wasn't perfectly even. So we're just going to give it a little more preheat time. We're going to tamp it and get that puck to even out a little. So I'm just tamping it and letting go, tamping it and letting go. So it had a little slippage, but now it's staying still. So we're good there. We're gonna go ahead and hit the preheat button, hold down the actuator, and we're going into our press. So if it would have continued to slip that way, we would essentially have had to take that out. We would have changed the parchment and we would have tried again. So it could be very inefficient when you're doing it that way and you have all these problems. So you could see right here, this little darker spot. This is essentially the bag slipping a little bit and bubbling out of the press. So that's something to look for at that point. If you just continued pressing at that point, you'd probably have a blowout. So you really want to take it easy on that. We're essentially going to be taking it off of there and changing the parchment out so we make sure we get our full yield off of that. So you can see it right there. It's coming out. We're going to go ahead and load our paper again, and we're gonna put that slipped bag back in here and repress it and get everything out of there. So this is cooled down now enough to where we can handle it again without a goopy mess. We're gonna go ahead and load it back in there and repress it. Since we already got a lot of rosin out of that bag, we could go ahead and ramp up the pressure just a little quicker. So this was just a bubble. We were able to salvage it, different piece of parchment, let it cool down, repress it. But if you have a blowout itself, it's handy to have that 25 micron stainless wrap around, so you could just wrap the whole blowout in that and repress it that way. So we're going to stop this press at 3 minutes since it was already on the plates for 45 seconds or so the first time. So we salvaged that without having to rewrap it or anything. Alright, so just to reiterate a couple of these points is to start with, when we're prepping, we want to make sure we use that pre-press and get all those hash pucks nice and even. We don't want to overload our bags. We want to make sure we put our paper in nice and secure so it doesn't move around as we're pressing. And then we really want to utilize this preheat method. So with that preheat method, we're getting that 0 psi to start with. And it's essential to have that low pressure when we're first starting. And that's what essentially is going to start that hydroplaning, or that bag slippage is coming down at too much pressure too quickly. And the better the hash is, the more likely it is to slip. So if you do end up with a slip or a bulge, any, blowouts or anything, the best chance is to get it off the press right away and let that bag cool down to room temp before you could deal with it. Whether it's a little bubble or a blowout, it's better at room temp to handle it that way. If you get a blowout, I recommend wrapping it in 25 micron stainless. You could wrap the bag and the hash and everything in that, and it's real easy to wrap as opposed to trying to get it back in a bag. If you just have a little bubble like we did today, you could take that off the press, change parchment, let it cool down, and get it back on there and repress it. If you are sliding or slipping during the preheat mode while you're hitting the actuators, just lay off and let it preheat a little longer. And that's really your time to mitigate your slippage and your hydroplaning, is during that preheat mode. Once you have a good bead of rosin around your bag, it's not going to slide and it's not going to go anywhere. So just utilizing that preheat mode, making sure you don't have the slippage, and then that first half of your press, just really slowly walk it up. 2 psi at a time, 2 psi at a time, 3 psi at a time, to 5, and then to 10. during your second half of your press when you have enough rosin on the parchment. But a lot of it is just experience and reacting to the flow of your rosin on the parchment. So whether you're pressing single bag, double bag, stainless, if you go through those first steps of prepping the paper and that preheat every time, no matter what you're pressing and what style you're pressing, just kind of do that same prep every time, you're going to be successful going forward. So as far as heat settings, my recommendation is between 180, 190 for good quality hash. And that way your terpenes aren't getting boiled off and you still have a nice consistent flow, you're still getting a great yield. But that temperature really varies on, personal opinion and preference. There's people that are pressing at 200 and 220 and they make great hash that way. So at that point the hash is going to come off the plates a little quicker. But if you press the same style no matter what temp you are, you're going to be successful. Those are a few tips and tricks to mitigate that bag slippage and hydroplaning. And we'll see you next time.